now from Cumbies. So pretty much, I'll introduce myself. I'm Dandrick Gellin, but everyone knows me as Ricky. I'm 26. I lived in Hudson for 23 years of my life. The first three I lived in Waltham. My parents moved here uh, in the 80s from Haiti. So I'm first generation American. And yeah, um, but some of the big things with my campaign, they revolve around accountability, uh, representation, and transparency. And so those are the three big issues I want to bring to the table while in this campaign. I'm like my opponent has run. His last election was unopposed, which is problematic because as people run unopposed, less people vote, and you have less of a legitimacy for our town government, which is problematic in and of itself. So,
Okay. And I noticed Scott's here too. Are you here, Scott?
Yeah,
Right.
yes, I am.
Hi.
Hi.
Jim, where are you? Take over.
Right here. Scott, Ricky, thank you both for joining us. Ricky, since you did have a chance to introduce yourself and state your platform, Scott, please go right ahead if you feel.
Yeah, hi, Scott Duplessis. Happy phase 2 to everybody. Hopefully this next phase is nice to have restaurants being able to open up for us. Just if a few of you may already know me, for those that don't, I'm a almost lifelong resident of Hudson. I've been living in Hudson for 57 of my 59 years. My wife, Laura Cardoso, the ex-Laura Cardoso. I have two daughters, Marissa and Alexa. Both grew up in Hudson, graduated from Hudson High, and both graduated from UMass Amherst. I work for the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. I work in a metals control division, which is, I do bridge inspections for the state. I'm in my, the end of my second term as a selectman. Before I was a selectman, I was on the Hudson Housing Authority for a little over 21 years. Both my mother and father have passed, but they both were born in Waltham and lived in Hudson for over 40 years. So I have a brother, David, who still lives in Hudson. He was a Hudson fireman for over 40 years. And that's the extent of my family. His wife, Michelle, and they have two children also that grew up in Hudson. I got a lot of interest in Hudson myself. I love this town. It's increased in size, obviously, over the years. Previously, I was involved a lot with youth sports. Both my daughters played youth sports. I was president of Hudson Youth Soccer. I was also vice president of Hudson Youth Softball and Baseball. Coached both my daughters, soccer, basketball, lacrosse, and I coached at Hudson High School. I coached basketball, boys basketball, and I coached boys and girls soccer. So that was a great part of my life. Kind of miss my kids not being little anymore, but everybody moves on. My oldest daughter lives in Philadelphia now. My youngest daughter was living in Brookline, but has moved back home during the pandemic because she's working from home. So kind of nice having her around, but her and my wife are actually in New Hampshire now working from up there. So I get to stay home and work from here, and they get to work from Lake Winnipesaukee, which is good for them. That's about it. I mean, there's more, but I won't keep going. If I don't know, Jane, I don't know or actually Jim, what you'd like to do next.
We've selected a few questions that we've gathered, and we'll go back and forth between the two of you.
Okay.
So to start out, Ricky.
hi.
Will you support our schools? Currently, there's a 2% cut to all departments, yet this will impact school as they're trying to adjust to the new reality, requiring equipment like PPE and modifications to infrastructure and increased staffing. How would you handle this problematic situation?
So right now, of course, like we're living in a new normal. Tax revenues have changed, due to the whole circumstance. Ideally, of course, schools are one of the necessities that a town government runs and provides for its citizens. So that's one of the top priorities in regards to funding. But I definitely don't want to make any promises just because we don't know what the tax revenues will look like. I do know, however, that there's going to need to be an increase in resources due to state regulations, state upcoming regulations with things like class size and stuff like that. So we're definitely going to probably need more resources rather than less. But I don't want to give you any promises until we know what's coming up.
Thank you. Scott, same question.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we recently did a 2% cut almost across the board. 2%, I guess, doesn't sound like a lot, but it kind of is. It's too bad it had to come to that. Fortunately, did not result in any layoffs or furloughs. A lot of this right now, we've been pretty lucky because most people have been paying their real estate taxes and all the other taxes that we have out there. People have been paying them, so we're pretty lucky on that end of it. But we don't know going down the road what the state's gonna give us. So that's a big factor right there. I would not like to see cuts anywhere. Obviously, schools are a huge. I mean, we're the biggest part of our budget, but one of the most important things we have in this town. So, I don't think anybody's looking directly to make cuts to school, but a lot of towns have. A lot of towns have had to do it. And there's, like Ricky said, no promises, but we'd like to keep it the way it is. I hope it can stay that way, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you. Switching it around, Scott, this question to you first. Do you support looking department by department using a zero-base budgeting method rather than the generalized equal cut to all?
That's, I don't think, we went into it looking to do across the board 2%. There could be some budgets that get cut more than others. And, I'm hoping it doesn't happen. But, to give you a percentage of what could and couldn't happen at this point right now, we're looking at, trying to get town meeting going, and we have a lot of stuff in there to expend, but some of that's probably I would say probably a lot of it's going to be on hold, other than stuff that's mandatory and needs to be done by town charter. So, I can't ever say that I support no cuts all the time. I was asked before where would you go for cuts? And I don't know where we would go, but it would have to come. That's why we depend on department heads. And as in, school is the biggest, we depend on them to come to us with their suggestions on if we need to make the cuts, where they're going to come from.
Thank you. Ricky? Same question.
Sure. My understanding is that zero-based budgeting is a method where all expenses have to be justified and approved for each spending period. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yes, I believe you are.
Okay, good. So pretty much, like I mentioned before, I'm really about accountability and transparency. I frankly would endorse zero-based budgeting. I think every spending should be analyzed and reanalyzed, especially nowadays, considering not only COVID, but also all these new calls for government, police, and just in general government accountability. So I'd like to make sure our money goes to the right places and is necessary And I think that we do that by going through the budget every year.
Thank you. Both candidates, could you speak about your approach to forming coalition with different types of people? Ricky, you first, please.
Okay, sure. I didn't mention, but I'll mention now. I went to UMass Amherst and graduated with a degree in political science. And while I was there, I made a lot of coalitions with different types of people. I personally am a libertarian, which means socially liberal and fiscally conservative. By doing so, like through my experiences at UMass building coalitions, I was able to speak with those who are socially progressive and make sure that, their views and their perspectives are taken into consideration. Things like, how we could tackle white supremacy and institutionalized racism, as well as, I don't think these are mutually exclusive, but also tackling things like government spending and the size of government, which, again, when you look at things like police accountability, that hits both spots. You have both the progressive side of an overinflated police institution where they are left to police themselves, and that can't be the case. It doesn't work, as well as fiscal conservatism by looking at the spending and making sure that the things that they spend on are necessary. Will be able to hold the police accountable. And by talking to both sides in a fashion that's not isolating either or, I think that's the best way to create coalitions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Duplessis.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, kind of my entire life, I've been somebody who's always enjoyed working with people. My job as an inspector, every day I'm working with people trying to problem solve. It's why I got involved, initially in the housing authority, my children being young, that was my way of serving the town. Being a selectman is a little bit more time consuming. I probably wouldn't have done this when my girls were little because I wanted to be dedicated to that. But being involved in the town, being involved with all the youth sports, my work, my social life, golfing, volleyball, racquetball, fitness. I've always worked well with other people. So, as far as that's concerned, I'm very approachable anytime, willing to talk things out and willing to listen to both sides. So that's it for me.
Thank you.
Sure.
After the large turnout of peaceful demonstration at Town Hall on Monday on the 8th, and considering the recent national polls that show overwhelming majority of Americans support protests that have taken place during the killing of George Floyd, what can we in Hudson do to make sure that our Black and brown residents are free from institutionalized racism and have a safe place to live their lives? Mr. Duplessis.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I'm great that was a peaceful protest the other night. That it was great to see. A lot of people came out. As far as the time, that answer, I don't, it's a national level. We're talking as a selectman here. I'm totally against any kind of racism. And I group racism in with something that's illegal. I mean, across the board, you name it, anything that's illegal, I'm against it. And I don't think we have an issue here. We have a pretty diverse population. And we make sure all our departments are aware of what's going on nowadays. I don't think there's anybody that's not aware of what recently happened and totally condemns what happened. And I don't think that's ever going to happen in this town with the people that that live here, with the people that we have running the town. I don't think that's an issue, but I support anything in this town to make it right for people. So I don't think we need to go beyond people speaking about it. We've our police department, I totally support our police department. I don't support any kind of funding or cuts to the police department. If it involves further education, that's fine. We will do that. And we depend on our I think we have fantastic police chief and all our department heads. So we depend on them to let us know if they think there's something that's needed. But like I said, I'm against any form of racism, you name anything else beyond that. I'm against all that.
Ricky?
Sure. I think that the best way to fight institutionalized racism as well as white supremacy in general is through just general exposure and representation. When I was in Hudson High, I graduated 2012, we were able to read the book Things Fall Apart by an African author who wrote about the first British landing in Nigeria. I think that it comes to things like that, it's good for like children to understand that there are other narratives for Africans as well as for Black people in general, besides the depressing ones that you hear of like poverty. And I think that that's important because as a middle class town with a small Black population, we need to expose to our middle class white friends that not every Black person is poor, not every African country is corrupt. And I think by that, as well as endorsing non-Eurocentric narratives on world history, I think we all understand that Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492 or however that goes. And we don't, however, know about Chinese excursions into the Americas, African excursion into the Americas. And I think by doing that, we can do a lot more for social progress than just when I was in high school. I remember this vividly. Whenever we read Huckleberry Finn, me and one other minority kid got pushed off to the side and asked if we were okay with this conversation. And of course, yes. But, you know, that doesn't really accomplish anything.
Thank you. Scott, you had mentioned that you're against anything you deem illegal, whether it is racist views. But if we're going to expand on that from simply racist views to anything dealing with minorities, anything dealing with alternative lifestyles, how would you... Sorry, lost my place. How would you deal with town employees making derogatory or insensitive comments?
Well, first of all, as in even my employment with the state, there's an intense training you have to, every year we have to go through training for, sexual harassment, racism, all those things, workplace harassment. You have to sign off. If there's an issue, you have to take training, because it's the same thing with the town. Any kind of problem we have like that needs to get addressed. And I think it does get addressed. There's, I don't want this to get into, this is the town of Hudson. We're not talking about a presidential race. We're not talking about, state rep or all that. We're a town here. We have a charter, and all the training that the employees have to go through, they stick to that. And if they don't stick to that, then there's consequences to pay for that. So I think all that we depend on the department heads for that. And we do have a human resources person in the town that's the head of all that if there's anything that happens.
Mr. Gillen?
What's it called? Of course, Hudson's one town, but we have distinct communities within our town that all need to be accepted, made feel comfortable, and integrated into our town. And when it comes to issues regarding like town employees and instances of racism, nowadays we still have overt racism, but we also have covert and institutionalized racism, which are issues in and of themselves that we need to tackle. Those are, however, more subtle, and people just through slight correction, because a lot of covert racism is something that's been instilled and socialized into people for a very long time. Civil rights is only as old as my parents. So it's something that slowly needs to progress. So that's one thing, as well as, I don't know if any of you have seen on my website, my 2-part accountability plan, but one of the things that I mentioned is a citizens oversight committee that I'd like to see created. And I think that if, for example, someone was to make a complaint about whether it be a citizen or a town employee or a private whistleblower, this is a type of place where I feel like an issue like that should be brought up. And then this citizens group would be able to analyze it. Hopefully, I would ideally like to see it not only separate from all town organizations, departments, etc., but I'd also like to see it be made of a diverse group of different people in town, so they'll be able to analyze and perhaps, if need be, punish any forms of racism, etc.
Thank you. In talking about what you would like to create or move forward with in the town, as you have stated earlier, you are a libertarian. How do you see your libertarian views affecting decisions you would make on the Hudson Selectmen?
Simply one thing, because, to libertarianism, there's 2 major parts. As I mentioned before, social liberalism and fiscal conservatism. And so one of the things I would bring is that view of social liberalism. I'm definitely open to hearing out, understanding, and helping others understand the different types of lifestyles and experiences that people have, and hoping to integrate those experiences into how I'd run the town. And then in regards to fiscal conservatism, with that comes accountability in and of itself. Every piece of spending, which is why I'm okay with a zero-based budgeting system, because every piece of spending should be justified. So those are the 2 things I think that together ideally would bring the best type of governance, especially for a town like ours, because of course resources do have limits to them, as well as there is no real limit to social acceptance. So both of those together, I think, is ideal.
Thank you. Going back to the town budget for a moment, with the shortfall in revenue from the town, how would you support the pushing of large capital items and major spending in the warrant articles? And if so, which items? Mr. Duplessis?
Yeah, I do support that, and I think that's what's going to happen. There's probably going to be a lot of articles. We have currently at this time, how many? 40 articles, and I'm not going to take a guess at how many are probably going to be put on hold. Capital items, probably things like vehicle purchase, some repairs, could be building repairs, not roof things, but stuff that is required, going to be there, but capital spending's probably going to be cut quite a bit. And that's where we can avoid, layoffs and furloughs and things like that. It's unfortunate this time because, things were going pretty good, and we were hoping that this, all the capital items could get passed. But unfortunately, I don't see that happening. So I get a feeling a lot of them are going to be passed over at the town meeting.
Okay. Campaign financing reports in 2014 show that 2 Selectman candidates Duplessis' largest campaign donors were Don and Audrey Garcia, who are the owners of Boyd Coating. Boyd Coating is responsible for the PFA contamination in Hudson's drinking water. Precision Coating replaced Boyd Coating, but remains responsible for the damage to Hudson. Precision Coating recently sent letters to Paramount Road residents indicating that they're conducting a study to see how much it would cost residents to pay for the town water hookup or filter for private wells. Mr. Duplessis, do you believe the town of Hudson should continue legal actions against Precision Coating so that the cost of providing safe drinking water to the citizens of Hudson on public water and the citizens of Parmenter, I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, road with private wells not being born out of citizens of Hudson.
Yeah, so some of this possible future litigation, I can't comment on that, but yeah, I mean, we have gone forward with litigation towards Boyd, Precision, and the owner of the facility. That being said, I can't say too much beyond that because it's in possible litigation. Part of it too is when you look at something like this, you know, a lot of people said, you know, compare it to some of these bigger things that have happened in the past. With these smaller companies, we want to try to recoup every cost we possibly can from them. But the thing is, we don't want them to go out of business also, because then we'll never get a penny if they ever declare bankruptcy. So we're trying to work with them to get settlements out of them to recoup costs that we had to spend to filter the PFAS and PFOA. And yes, to help people that are currently not on town water in that area that could possibly be affected. But when, you know, we're not talking a Monsanto here, and we're trying to push whether it, you know, Boyd coating was part of that initial thing. They sold. There's still monies being held up, so we're looking at possibly trying to get some from that. You did mention at the beginning as far as campaign donations. Yeah, I took donations from Don Garcia way before any of this came up. So did a lot of other candidates and current, you know, Kate Hogan won, Jamie Eldridge. Don was a big part of this community for a long time and made a lot of donations to candidates and made a lot of donations to the town. Notwithstanding what happened, I'm not, you know, did Don know what was going on? I don't know. You know, that could be in court later on. But whatever money is available, whether it's money that he has or had coming and Precision, we are going after that wholeheartedly to try to recoup everything we can for the town and anybody that needs to hook up to the system. We would love to be able to help everybody. It's one of the drinking water is one of the most important things right at the top of the list in this town. Right now, we're doing really well with that, with the filtering. And I plan for the future is, you know, I don't want us to ever have to spend this kind of money again. It's unfortunate, you know, a small town, our water was good for a long time, but in the future, one of the things maybe like Marlboro did is we may have to hook up to the MWRA. It's a huge expenditure to do that, but you know, we spent $5 million to get this filtration going. If it costs us $10 million to hook up to them, who knows what's coming? You know, 2 years ago, nobody even knew that this stuff existed in the water. Now it's out there, and who knows what else could be in the future. So we want to try to protect that, and could be possibly that we look into hooking up to the MWRA to try to avoid this in the future.
Thank you. We're coming up on the 8 o'clock time, so we have one last question for you both. If elected as selectman, how are you going to address the growing concerns about rising rent, both commercial and residential, and gentrification in Hudson? Mr. Duplessis.
Yeah, so, you know, I think some of that rent issue has been addressed by the state. There's been help, especially during this pandemic. You know, unfortunately, in any town that is successful, you take any town, city, you know, years ago, my family moved to Hudson They were in Waltham, so things were getting expensive. This is what they call the sticks out here, the suburbs, and we moved out here. Then all this, when high tech came, when digital came, all the property values up here went up. Became a little bit more difficult to afford in the areas, and I think that's Boston has expanded out. It's a fantastic area for high tech. Hospitals, the medical field, biotech, all that. So all that drives costs up. When you talk about gentrification, I was on the housing authority for a long time. That's one big thing we need to have here is affordable housing. I've always been a proponent for that. We worked hard to get above our threshold so that we don't have 40B developers coming in here. When they come in, they say, yeah, we build houses, but they skirt around all the zoning issues. So I don't want to see 40B. We're running out of places, but the popularity of this town, unfortunately, drives rent up. And as it does, it drives up costs of homes, taxes. Biggest driver of our taxes is our school system. And, when people say about making cuts and everything, when you take schools, police, fire, you name it, I don't know how many unions we have. They negotiate and they have mandatory raises just about every time. And when taxes go up, most of the time that's paying for those increases in those contracts. So cost of everything goes up around here. We got a popular downtown now. Everybody wants to come here. So the younger crowd would love to get an apartment here. People are, looking to build more apartments, maybe like the Thomas Taylor, they're looking to put apartments over there. So, how do you address it? Anybody that needs help, we look for all avenues to help them if they can't afford their rent. But it's a popular place to live right now. And we're lucky that it is. And you know what that means? That your resale value is going to stay high too. So we'd like to, take care of all of our constituents and the people that are on the lower rent side of it to help them out.
Thank you, sir. We're going to have to leave it there for time.
Yep.
Mr.
Sure.
Allen, please.
Hi. So I have friends who are trying to achieve the millennial dream of moving out of their parents' basements. And we all, we look at Zillow, all the rent, and it all is over 1,000, 1,200. And the census recommends that people only spend about 30% of their income on rent and housing, which on average that is not the case here in Hudson for people who are working. And a lot of I think 20% of Hudson's jobs are retail and construction. So a large chunk of the people who live here and work according to our census aren't able to afford it. The one, Hudson has a, the Economic Development Committee, which has helped do a lot of work on Main Street. I'd like to see if we could do some of that same work in incentivizing lower rent, the offering of lower rent here in Hudson. We have all of these different apartment complexes being built, but I don't know who can afford them. Definitely not many people in my generation can afford them, that's problematic. So that's something I'd definitely like to be changed. It does stink, however, to have the way that Massachusetts works in regards to town government. There isn't a lot that can be done. However, I think that if Hudson can use its institutions to help rebuild Main Street, I don't see why we can't also work towards a goal of providing private but affordable housing as well, which would be the best of both worlds, both cheaper for people to live in, as well as perhaps lower the burden on the town and the state by building complexes ourselves. But ideally, I want to see more affordable housing.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, I want to thank both of you for coming. And good luck to you in the upcoming 2 weeks.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Take care.
Have a great night.
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you.